1 drop of blood in 8 liters of water. You wouldn't even see it with your eyes. You wouldn't taste it. A lab analysis would only detect it at a certain concentration. But a wolf, it can smell it. Not approximately, not there's something, but precisely. Blood, direction, distance. Its nose functions like a chemical laboratory, faster and more accurately than any device we have invented in the last 200 years. And this is just the beginning. We tend to think of the wolf as a gray predator from fairy tales, evil, hungry, dangerous. Some might recall Little Red Riding Hood, while others think of a documentary about Yellowstone. But the real wolf is far more complex than any image from popular culture, and when you start to delve into the details, it can be a bit unsettling. Not from fear, from the scale of it all. Let's start with a simple question. Which predator in the history of Earth has managed to inhabit both hemispheres simultaneously? Not in different eras, not migrating back and forth, but simultaneously. From the Canadian tundra to the Arabian deserts, from the Scandinavian forests to the Indian plains? The answer is the wolf. It is the only large terrestrial predator that has achieved this. Not the lion, not the tiger, not the bear. Only the wolf. And this is no coincidence. It is the result of engineering perfection that evolution has crafted over millions of years. Let's begin with the heart. A wolf's heart is disproportionately large compared to its body. It may sound trivial, but it changes everything. A large heart pumps more blood with each beat. More blood means more oxygen in the muscles. More oxygen means the muscles can work longer without building up lactic acid. You probably know that feeling. You're running, and at some point, your legs feel like lead, heavy, refusing to obey. That's lactic acid accumulating in the muscle fibers. Well, a wolf can trot at about 10 kilometers per hour for nearly the entire day. Not a sprint, not a dash, a steady, measured run for hours. Because its heart is built for a marathon, not a 100-meter dash. And here's where it gets interesting. The wolf is not a sprinter. A cheetah can accelerate to 120 kilometers per hour but exhausts itself in 30 seconds. A wolf can reach 65 but can maintain high speeds for minutes and average speeds for hours. This is a fundamentally different strategy. The cheetah is a sniper rifle. One shot, one attempt. The wolf is a siege engine. It doesn't chase down its prey, it exhausts it. Now let's talk about its fur. We wear down jackets, thermal underwear, membrane jackets, entire technologies to avoid freezing at -20 degrees. The wolf lives at -50, without clothing, without shelter. It simply lies on the snow and sleeps. Its fur consists of 2 layers. The outer layer is coarse and long, repelling water and snow, functioning like the outer shell of a tent. The inner layer is dense, soft, and so thick that water cannot physically reach it. This inner layer traps air close to the body, creating a thermal cushion. Essentially, the wolf carries the perfect sleeping bag that is waterproof, windproof, and requires no replacement. Engineers developing Arctic gear are still studying the structure of wolf fur. We are literally trying to replicate what it already has. Now look at its paws. Between the toes, wolves have webbing, like a duck, but with a different function. In the snow, they work like snowshoes, distributing weight over a larger area, allowing the wolf not to sink where an elk might go in up to its chest. This is a colossal advantage during winter hunts. The prey gets stuck while the wolf glides over the surface. But the same webbing helps it swim. Wolves can easily cross rivers and lakes, and they do so not out of desperation, but as part of their normal route. The same design solves 2 completely different problems. Evolution does not favor wastefulness. Lastly, regarding the body, there's something important to know before we move on to how wolves think and communicate. The speed of their nerve response. When an elk makes a sudden dash to the side, the wolf has fractions of a second to react. Not to think, not to assess, to react. The muscles must receive a signal from the brain and act before the prey escapes their reach. The speed of nerve impulse transmission in wolves is about twice that of humans. What takes you a quarter of a second takes a wolf only an eighth. In the world of hunting, where moments decide everything, this is the difference between food and hunger. Do you see where I'm going with this? the wolf is not just a predator, it is a system. The heart of a marathon runner, the fur of an Arctic explorer, transformer-like paws, a reaction that would shame any professional athlete. Every element is finely tuned to the others. Every detail works towards the common result. For millions of years, evolution has honed this design, eliminating the unnecessary, enhancing the essential. And it has produced a creature capable of living in deserts and tundras, running all day and swimming across rivers, smelling blood in water, and reacting faster than you can blink. But do you know what truly separates the wolf from most predators? Not its muscles, not its nose, and not its heart, but what happens within the pack. Because the wolf's body is an impressive machine, but it is its brain and social organization that have made it what it has become. The most successful large predator in the history of our planet. Most predators are born with a set of instincts and figure things out on their own. A cheetah cub starts chasing small prey, misses, chases again, and eventually gets it right. A young hawk falls from a branch, flaps its wings, falls again, and sooner or later learns to fly. A method of trial and error, harsh but effective. The wolf is different. The wolf teaches. Adult wolves train their pups in hunting step by step, and this is not a figure of speech, but a literal sequence of actions. First, the young wolf is shown a dead prey. It sniffs, touches, gets accustomed to the smell and size. Then, it is introduced to a wounded or weakened animal, so it can understand how a living target moves, where its vulnerabilities are, how it reacts to an approach. Only after this does the young wolf participate in a real hunt for a healthy, strong animal that can kick and kill with one blow. This is not instinct. Instinct does not come in 3 stages. This is the transmission of experience from generation to generation, exactly what we have come to consider an exclusively human ability. And here it's important to say something about the pack itself, because popular culture has created a completely false picture. Forget the word alpha. Forget the image of a brutal leader who keeps the others in line by force. This is a myth that arose from observations of wolves in captivity, in zoos, where unfamiliar animals were placed in the same enclosure. Of course, they fought for hierarchy. Put 10 strangers in a room without the option to leave. They will also start to figure out who is in charge. But in the wild, a wolf pack is a family, literally. A mother, a father, and their offspring of various ages. The alpha pair are simply the parents. They did not seize power. They created a family. And the younger ones listened to the older ones because the older ones raised them and taught them how to survive. When a young wolf matures and seeks independence, it does not overthrow its father. It leaves. And here begins one of the most astonishing stories in biology. A young wolf that decides to leave its family pack sets out on its journey alone, without a map, without landmarks, without guarantees. It seeks free territory and a partner to start its own family. The distances it covers are impressive, even to people who engage in extreme travel. There have been recorded cases of solitary wolves traveling over 1,000 kilometers, across mountains, rivers, highways, through the territories of other packs where they could be killed. This is one of the longest dispersal routes among all terrestrial predators on the planet. And all for one reason, to find a mate and begin its own story from scratch. Now let's talk about the territory where this story unfolds. The area of one pack can range from 50 to 1,000 square kilometers. The variation is vast, and it depends on one simple thing: how much food is available in the area. Where prey is abundant, the pack lives compactly. Where prey is scattered over a large area, wolves patrol territories the size of a small European country. And they know this territory by heart, not approximately, by heart. Every trail, every watering hole, every place where elk cross the river. Researchers have found that wolves remember specific migration routes of prey and return to them years later. This means that in a wolf's mind, there exists a detailed map of the terrain with notes. 3 years ago, moose came to drink here in October. Worth checking again. But knowing the territory is not enough. It must be defended. And here we come to how wolves communicate. Because this is a separate universe. You've heard a wolf's howl, at least in a recording, at least in a movie. A long drawn-out sound that sends shivers down your spine. But howling is not just a sound, it is a message. Moreover, it is a complex, multi-layered message that contains specific information. When a pack howls, a neighboring pack can determine from the sound how many wolves are participating in the chorus. Not approximately, but quite accurately, because each voice is unique and differs in tone and pitch. Besides the number, the howl conveys the emotional state. The pack is aggressive or calm, it is on its territory or on someone else's, it has just eaten or is hungry and ready to fight for resources. And here's what's remarkable. Neighboring packs make strategic decisions based solely on what they hear. If the howl indicates that a large, well-fed pack is howling on its territory across the river, it's better not to interfere. If there are few voices and they sound uncertain, it might be worth trying to push the boundary. This is acoustic reconnaissance. Wolves assess the strength of their opponent without seeing it, without smelling it, only by sound. And based on this analysis, they decide whether to engage in conflict or retreat. We have developed radars, satellite reconnaissance, early warning systems. Wolves do something similar using their voices and ears, and they have been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. So here's what you get when you put it all together. The wolf is not a solitary predator with a set of reflexes. It is a social being that teaches its young to hunt, remembers prey routes for years, lives in families rather than packs, sends its grown children on journeys of 1,000 kilometers, and negotiates with neighbors through sound. The level of complexity with which the wolf's brain operates does not fit the image of a dumb, evil beast from a fairy tale. But the most amazing thing about the wolf is not the wolf itself, it is what it does to the world around it. Because the wolf changes the landscape. Literally, it alters the flow of rivers, the growth of trees, and the diversity of plant species. And it does this simply by existing. When a wolf kills a moose, the story does not end. It only begins. Because the carcass of a large animal in the middle of the forest is not just a dead body. It is a restaurant that will operate for weeks, and for some, months. Scientists have estimated that one wolf pack leaves around 100 carcasses of large animals in its territory each year. 100 carcasses, and each one feeds an average of 20 different species of living beings. First come the crows and magpies. They usually appear even before the wolves have finished eating, waiting for their turn nearby. Then come the foxes, which cannot take down a moose themselves, but are great at scavenging from those who can. Following them are eagles, golden eagles, and owls. When only bones, tendons, and scraps of hide remain, beetles, fly larvae, and bacteria take over. Each layer of consumers passes the remains to the next, and in the end, everything that was once a living moose returns to the soil and becomes nourishment for the grass that the next moose will eat. The cycle is complete. And here's the thing. Without the wolf, this cycle works quite differently. The moose dies from old age or disease, and this happens significantly less than 100 times a year in one territory. This means that all those 20 species, from the crow to the beetle, receive less food, their populations shrink, and the entire food web becomes poorer. The wolf, without even realizing it, acts as the largest free supplier of nourishment in the ecosystem. By removing one life, it supports dozens of others. This is not a beautiful metaphor. This is arithmetic that can be verified by counting species in areas with wolves and without them. But the wolf influences the landscape not only through carcasses. There is a subtler and, frankly, more beautiful effect. In Scandinavia, a long-term study was conducted on territories where wolves returned after decades of absence. It would be logical to expect that the moose population would sharply decline. A predator has arrived, started eating, and the herd has decreased. But something different happened. The number of moose changed very little. However, their behavior changed. Moose began to move more. They stopped standing in one place for hours, stripping bark and young shoots down to bare wood. They started to roam, moving from one area to another, because lingering in an open space where a pack might find them was now dangerous. And the result was astonishing. The pressure on the vegetation was evenly distributed across the territory. Trees that were once overgrazed to death received a reprieve and began to recover. The underbrush became denser. The diversity of plant species increased because moose no longer overbrowsed the same areas, to the point of barrenness. The wolf did not plant a single tree. It simply made the moose move, and the forest came alive. This is called the ecology of fear, although the name is somewhat misleading. It's not that everything around is afraid. It's that the presence of a predator forces herbivores to make decisions, not to stand still, but to move, not to overgraze one spot, but to roam, not to concentrate in safe valleys, but to disperse. And these tiny changes in the behavior of each individual moose, deer, or roe deer accumulate into a massive effect at the landscape level. The wolf manages the forest without ever touching a tree, and now a sharp turn, because there is a creature in nature that also influences the behavior of others, but does so from within. And the story of this creature is so strange that it's hard to believe at first. Toxoplasma, a single-celled parasite. It is about 250 million years old. It existed when the ancestors of dinosaurs still walked the earth. Over this time, Toxoplasma has undergone a long process of co-evolution with felines, as it completes its life cycle and reproduces in a cat's body. The cat is the final destination. But to get into a cat, the parasite must first be inside someone that the cat will eat. And this is where things get jaw-droppingly fascinating for biologists. Toxoplasma, once inside a mouse, alters its behavior. The infected mouse stops fearing the smell of cat urine. Moreover, it becomes attracted to it. The mouse literally walks toward the predator, and the cat gets an easy meal, along with the parasite that orchestrated this outcome. This is not a random glitch in the nervous system. It is an evolutionary strategy honed over 250 million years. Make the intermediate host come to the primary host. And here's what makes this story truly unsettling. Toxoplasma infects not only mice. Estimates suggest that between 20 and 50% of people on the planet are carriers of this parasite. For most, it manifests in no way. The immune system keeps it in check, but studies have shown that infected individuals statistically have slower reaction times. Not catastrophically so, not to the point where the person cannot function, but enough to be noticeable in the data. And here's a specific fact that makes you think. In countries where the percentage of Toxoplasma carriers is above average, there is statistically a higher number of traffic accidents. Correlation does not imply direct causation, and scientists emphasize this. But the coincidence is consistent enough that it cannot simply be dismissed as chance. This paints a picture that can make your head spin a bit. The wolf shapes the landscape by making moose move. Toxoplasma has paved a route through millions of species to return to the cat. Nature is not chaos. It is a system where every participant pulls on invisible strings, and the results manifest where you least expect them. The forest becomes denser because a predator has appeared. The mouse goes to the cat because the parasite decided so. A person behind the wheel reacts a bit slower because 250 million years ago, a single-celled organism began adapting to life inside another body. And in this entire web of connections, the wolf occupies a special place because its story with humans is not just a tale of predator and prey. It is a story of partnership that has changed both species forever. Somewhere between 40 and 15,000 years ago, we will likely never know the exact date. An event occurred that changed the course of human civilization more than the invention of the wheel. A group of wolves began to approach the camps of hunters, not to attack, to come. They smelled the remnants of butchered prey, bones, entrails, scraps of meat that people discarded. And instead of keeping their distance, as all other predators did, these particular wolves began to return again and again. They chose humans. In 2022, geneticists published the results of a large-scale DNA analysis that clarified many questions. All domestic dogs on the planet, from Chihuahuas to Great Danes, from a mutt in a Moscow courtyard to a purebred Akita Inu in Tokyo, descended from one small population of wolves. Not from different groups in different places, as was previously thought. From one. Somewhere at the crossroads of Europe and Asia lived a pack that was just a bit bolder, a bit more curious, and a bit more tolerant of the presence of strange two-legged beings by the fire. And that bit was enough to set in motion a process that continues to this day. Here's a detail worth fully realizing. The domestication of the wolf occurred before humans began to cultivate wheat, before agriculture emerged, before we learned to make pottery, build permanent homes, and smelt metal. The dog is older than civilization. When humans were still nomadic hunters without a permanent home, a descendant of the wolf was already walking beside them. We did not domesticate the dog because we had agriculture and needed a guard. It was the other way around. The dog appeared when we had nothing but a spear and a fire. And perhaps this is one of the hypotheses currently being actively discussed. It was the partnership with the ancestor of the dog that gave our ancestors the competitive advantage that helped them survive against other human species, including Neanderthals. But while one line of wolves was becoming dogs, the others continued living their lives. And that life has turned into a war of extermination over the last few centuries. People killed wolves wherever they could reach them. They poisoned them, set traps, shot them from helicopters, and burned their dens. By the mid-20th century, the wolf had been completely exterminated in most countries of Western Europe. In Britain, it disappeared in the 18th century. In France, Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, by the mid-20th century. It seemed that there was no longer any place for the wolf in densely populated Europe. Humans had won. And then something happened that no one planned. In Italy, in the Apennine Mountains, a small population of wolves survived. There were very few. Estimates suggest around 100 individuals in the 70s of the last century. 100 wolves for all of Italy. This was barely enough for the species to survive. But at some point, the Italian authorities enacted a protection law. The wolves were no longer hunted, and the population began to grow slowly. Then the wolves did what wolves do best. They moved. From the Apennines, they headed north, through the Alps, over passes, through mountain valleys, without anyone's help, without relocation programs, without cages and helicopters. They simply walked. Young wolves left their family packs, traveled hundreds of kilometers, found partners, and started new families. By the early 2000s, they had reached France, then Switzerland, then Germany. In 2 decades, wolves traveled over 1,000 kilometers and returned to the countries from which they had been wiped out generations ago. Without a single government decision on reintroduction, by themselves. This makes the wolf the only large predator that has managed to restore its presence in densely populated Western Europe on its own. Not the bear, not the lynx, not anyone else. Only the wolf. The very beast that had been tried to be erased from the face of the earth for 1,000 years. But this return has a dark side, and it would be unfair not to mention it. Roads, cities, railways, industrial zones. All of this cuts territories into isolated fragments. Wolves from one region cannot physically meet wolves from another because a highway or urban agglomeration lies between them. And when a population is isolated and small, inbreeding begins, the mating of close relatives. Genetic diversity declines, hereditary problems accumulate, and each subsequent generation is slightly weaker than the previous one. In Finland and Scandinavia, wolves are already showing high levels of inbreeding, and biologists are sounding the alarm. The wolf has returned, but if we do not ensure its ability to move between populations, through green corridors, ecological bridges over roads, protected crossings, the return may be temporary. A species that has traveled 1,000 kilometers across the Alps could go extinct because it couldn't cross a 4-lane highway. And now, if we mentally rewind everything we've talked about, a picture emerges that is very different from the fairy tale of the evil gray predator. The wolf is an animal with the heart of a marathon runner and a reaction speed twice that of a human. It teaches its young to hunt in 3 stages, remembers prey routes for years, and conducts acoustic reconnaissance through howling. It feeds 20 species with 1 carcass and makes the forest grow denser simply by making moose move. Its descendant sleeps on your couch and brings you a ball. And this partnership is older than agriculture, writing, and the first cities. The wolf is not an enemy. The wolf is a mirror. In it, you can see how nature is truly structured, not as a war of all against all, but as a network where the predator feeds the scavenger. The scavenger enriches the soil grows the grass feeds the elk, and the elk feeds the predator. And if you remove one link from this network, everything else falls apart. For 1,000 years, we have tried to remove this link. The wolf has returned on its own. The question now is whether we will have the wisdom not to drive it away again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, I would appreciate a like and a subscription to the channel.